The last bus pulled away at exactly 11:18 p.m., its taillights disappearing into the cold Chicago rain as Ava Fisher stood frozen on the curb clutching a bus ticket folded neatly in half. She didn't chase it. She didn't scream. With trembling hands, she called the CTA dispatcher and whispered, "Please, don't ask the driver to come back for me. Just tell him my little boy keeps asking if Mommy is coming home tonight." Inside the moving bus, the message crackled through the driver's radio. Thomas Gallagher tightened his grip on the steering wheel, stared into the rearview mirror, and made a decision that could cost him the career he'd spent 28 years building. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. If stories about ordinary people changing lives through extraordinary kindness speak to your heart, I'd love for you to join us by subscribing for more. Every weekday, Ava Fisher woke up at 5:40 a.m., 10 minutes before the alarm on her old phone had a chance to buzz. She had trained herself to wake before it, partly because years of worry had become a second clock inside her body, and partly because those quiet 10 minutes belonged only to her. They were the only moments in the day when the apartment was completely still. The one-bedroom apartment sat on the third floor of a worn brick building on Chicago's South Side. The radiators hissed through winter, the windows rattled whenever the wind came off Lake Michigan, and the hallway always smelled faintly of old paint and laundry detergent. It wasn't much, but it was clean. Ava made sure of that. She slipped out of bed carefully so the mattress wouldn't squeak. Across the tiny living room, where an old pull-out couch had become her permanent bed, the bedroom door stood slightly open. She peeked inside. Noah was asleep. His chest rose and fell steadily beneath a faded blue dinosaur blanket that had become too small for him years ago. His inhaler rested on the nightstand beside a framed crayon drawing that read in uneven letters, "Me and Mom." Ava smiled every morning when she saw that drawing. She quietly started the coffee maker, though she barely drank coffee anymore. Instead, she warmed yesterday's leftovers in a small skillet, scrambled one egg, and toasted 2 slices of bread. At exactly 6:20, she opened Noah's bedroom door. "Good morning, buddy." The 8-year-old rubbed his eyes. "Is it school day?" "It is." "Is it oatmeal day?" She laughed softly. "No, egg day." He grinned. "Egg day is better." Simple conversations like that kept the apartment warm, even when the weather outside wasn't. While Noah ate breakfast, Ava packed his lunch: a peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, a small bag of pretzels she had bought on sale, a handwritten note folded into a square. Every single lunch contained one. Sometimes it said, "I'm proud of you." Sometimes, "Be kind today." Sometimes, "See you tonight." Noah collected every note inside a shoebox beneath his bed. At 7:10, Eleanor Brooks knocked twice before opening the apartment door. "I brought fresh banana bread." The 72-year-old widow never came empty-handed. Her silver hair was tied neatly beneath a knitted cap, and she carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime caring for others. Her own children lived in different states and rarely visited, yet she never complained. Instead, she had quietly become the closest thing Noah had to a grandmother. "You spoil us," Ava said. "I've lived long enough to know banana bread disappears faster than loneliness." They laughed. Eleanor helped Noah zip his jacket while Ava searched for her bus pass inside her worn canvas bag. Then, as she did every morning and every evening without fail, Ava removed a single bus ticket from the side pocket. She carefully folded it in half. Not once, not into quarters, exactly in half. She slipped it into the breast pocket of her jacket. Eleanor noticed. "You still do that?" Ava nodded. "I don't think I'll ever stop." Years ago, before her mother passed away from cancer, she had always folded bus tickets that way. One rainy afternoon when Ava had been only 16, her mother had smiled and placed a folded ticket into her daughter's hand. "Always leave yourself a way home." At the time, Ava thought she meant not losing the ticket. Only later did she understand she was talking about something much bigger. Never spend every dollar. Never burn every bridge. Never lose your dignity. Always leave yourself a way home. That sentence stayed with Ava long after everything else had faded. At 7:35, she kissed Noah's forehead. "I'll see you after work." He hugged her tightly. "I'll wait up." "You don't have to." "I want to." She smiled but didn't answer. She knew he always did. After dropping Noah at school, Ava caught another bus toward downtown Chicago. Her daytime hours disappeared into ordinary errands, grocery shopping with coupons, pharmacy visits, and paperwork for Noah's asthma medication. Every dollar had a destination before it even arrived. Her weekly notebook proved it. Rent, electricity, school supplies, medication, laundry, transportation, emergency savings. The last category usually contained less than $20. Still, Ava refused to erase it. No matter how little she earned, she believed emergencies deserved their own place. By late afternoon, she returned home just long enough to prepare dinner before leaving for work. She made chicken noodle soup that evening. Noah sat at the small kitchen table coloring pictures, while Eleanor watched an old game show on television. "You don't have to stay every night," Ava told her. "I know. But you always do." "I know." "You never let me pay you." Eleanor looked almost offended. "If I wanted money, I'd have become a lawyer." They both laughed again. Then Eleanor became serious. "You let me help because someday Noah will remember there were people who stayed." Ava looked down. "So many people leave." "Exactly." That sentence lingered between them. At 5:45 p.m., Ava changed into her Navy work uniform. The fabric had faded after years of washing. The company logo was beginning to peel away. She tied her hair into a low ponytail and slipped on comfortable sneakers whose white soles had long since turned gray. Before leaving, she checked Noah's inhaler. One full inhaler in the backpack, another beside the bed, one inside Eleanor's purse. 3 backups. She never took chances. "Be good." "I always am," Noah protested. "Mostly," he giggled. "I love you." "I love you more." "You always win." "I know." She closed the apartment door, carrying nothing but her canvas bag, her lunch container, and that carefully folded bus ticket resting safely inside her jacket pocket. Downtown looked completely different after sunset. The glass office towers reflected thousands of lights. Business executives hurried toward expensive restaurants. Tourists filled hotel lobbies. Delivery drivers rushed between buildings. Few people noticed the cleaning crews arriving just as everyone else was leaving. Ava entered the 60-story office tower through the employee entrance. The security guard smiled. "Evening, Miss Fisher." "Evening, Frank." The day workers rarely looked at the cleaners. Frank always did. Small kindnesses mattered. The janitorial team clocked in at precisely 6:30 p.m. mops. Buckets, vacuum cleaners, disinfectant, trash carts. Everything rolled into place with practiced routine. Ava worked quietly. She wasn't the fastest employee. She wasn't the loudest. She simply believed every desk deserved to be left cleaner than she had found it. Sometimes she imagined the office workers arriving the next morning without ever wondering who emptied their trash cans or wiped coffee rings from their conference tables. Invisible work, done by invisible people. She didn't resent it. She only hoped Noah would grow up believing every honest job deserved respect. As the elevator carried her toward the 42nd floor, Ava instinctively touched the folded ticket inside her pocket. Still there, always there, a silent promise. No matter how difficult life became, she would always find her way home. For nearly 11 months, Ava Fisher's life followed the same rhythm so precisely that she could almost measure time without looking at a clock. At 6:30 every evening, she clocked into the 60-story office tower on Wacker Drive. At 7:15, she finished the executive conference rooms. At 8:40, she emptied recycling bins on the 29th floor. At 9:30, she cleaned the employee cafeteria after the last software engineers had gone home. At 10:20, she polished the marble lobby until it reflected every light fixture above like still water, and at exactly 10:47 p.m., she left through the employee entrance carrying her canvas bag, crossed 2 intersections, and reached the CTA bus stop with 8 minutes to spare. Routine wasn't boring. Routine was survival. People with comfortable lives often talked about being spontaneous. Ava couldn't afford spontaneity. Missing one bus meant missing an entire night with Noah. Spending $10 unexpected meant adjusting meals for the rest of the week. Being 5 minutes late meant everything else fell apart. She had built her life like a row of dominoes. Each piece depended on the one before it. Every night, as she approached the bus stop, she reached into the breast pocket of her jacket and gently touched the folded ticket. Still there, always there. It had become less about transportation and more like a quiet ritual, reminding herself of her mother's words. Always leave yourself a way home. The stop sat beneath an aging street lamp that buzzed faintly whenever the weather turned damp. During the summer, people crowded the sidewalk. By late autumn, only a handful of night shift workers waited there. Hospital employees, restaurant cooks, warehouse workers, janitors, security guards, people whose work began after everyone else's had ended. They rarely spoke much. Everyone looked tired in the same way. The headlights appeared around the corner at exactly 10:55. Almost every night. Never early, rarely late. Route 29, the last bus toward Southside. Its driver was Thomas Gallagher. Most passengers simply called him Tom. Tom had been driving city buses longer than some of the younger passengers had been alive. His thick gray mustache, weathered hands, and calm voice had become as familiar to regular riders as the rumble of the engine itself. He wasn't particularly cheerful. Neither was he unfriendly. He greeted every passenger exactly the same. "Evening," Ava answered every time. "Good evening." That was usually the entire conversation. Yet somehow, over months of repetition, two strangers began recognizing each other's existence. Tom noticed that Ava always thanked him before stepping off. He noticed she never used her phone during the ride. He noticed she often closed her eyes, not to sleep, but simply to rest. He noticed the folded bus ticket she always held for a brief second before putting it away. He never asked why. Some stories belonged to their owners until they were ready to tell them. Ava noticed things too. Tom always waited until elderly passengers had fully sat down before pulling away. He remembered which rider needed the wheelchair ramp without being asked. He once drove half a block more slowly because a little girl had dropped her stuffed rabbit in the aisle. Little things, invisible things, kindnesses that never appeared on schedules. One Thursday evening, rain tapped softly against the bus windows as Ava climbed aboard. "Evening," Tom said. "Good evening." She paid her fare and walked toward her usual seat near the middle. Marcus Reed, a construction foreman who often caught the same bus after overtime shifts, sat 2 rows behind her. Emily Dawson, an emergency room nurse from Northwestern Memorial Hospital, sat near the front with her hospital badge still clipped to her navy scrubs. Without realizing it, they had all become part of one another's nightly routine. Not friends, just familiar faces. The kind strangers begin to trust simply because they keep showing up. The bus rolled through downtown Chicago. Outside, expensive restaurants glowed with warm yellow lights, while office towers slowly went dark floor by floor. Inside the bus, silence settled comfortably. A few passengers read books. Others stared out the windows. Some simply rested their eyes after 12-hour shifts. Halfway through the ride, Ava's phone vibrated. She smiled before even looking. The screen read exactly what she expected. Noah, every single night. At exactly 11:15, never 11:14, never 11:16, always 11:15. She answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart." A sleepy little voice came through the speaker. "Mom, I'm here." "Are you on your way?" The question never changed. Neither did her answer. "I'm coming home." Noah seemed satisfied every time he heard those 3 words. "Okay. What did Mrs. Brooks make for dinner tonight?" "Chicken soup. Did you eat your vegetables?" "Most of them." She laughed quietly. "I'll inspect the bowl when I get home." "You always do." "Because I know you," he giggled. "When you get home, can we finish the dinosaur puzzle?" "If you're still awake." "I'll try." "No pressure." "I'll wait." "I know." The conversation rarely lasted longer than 2 minutes. It didn't need to. The important part was hearing each other's voices. Hearing, "I'm coming home." After hanging up, Ava rested her forehead against the cool window. She watched the city blur into long streaks of white and red light. She thought about how strange life could be. She spent every day cleaning offices filled with people who probably earned more in one afternoon than she earned in a week. Yet when Noah hugged her each night, she never felt poor. She felt tired. She felt worried, sometimes frightened, but never poor. Not in the ways that mattered most. When the bus reached her neighborhood, Tom glanced briefly in the mirror. He watched Ava step carefully down the stairs. As always, she paused beside his seat. "Thank you. You have a good night." "You too." She disappeared into the darkness. Tom pulled away. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, he found himself checking the mirror until she had safely crossed the street. It had become another habit, another small routine. The following evening unfolded exactly the same way, then the next. Days quietly became weeks. Weeks quietly became months. Winter crept closer. The wind grew colder. The trees along Michigan Avenue shed nearly all their leaves. One evening, while waiting for Noah outside school, Ava overheard another parent complaining. "I hate taking the bus." A second parent laughed. "I'd rather walk than ride public transit." Ava smiled politely, but said nothing. To her, the bus wasn't an inconvenience. It was the thread holding her entire life together. Without it, she couldn't afford a car. Without it, she couldn't keep her evening job. Without that job, she couldn't pay rent. Without rent, Noah wouldn't have a home. People often forgot that public transportation wasn't simply about getting somewhere. For thousands of people, it was the difference between stability and disaster. That night before leaving for work, Noah hugged her a little longer than usual. "You'll be home after the bus." "Like always." "You promise?" She kissed the top of his head. "I promise." As she reached for her jacket, her fingers automatically searched for the folded ticket. It was exactly where it always belonged. She smiled. Then she walked into the chilly November evening, completely unaware that within a few days the routine that had quietly protected her little family for nearly a year would be broken by a single unexpected decision made by someone else. Monday arrived wrapped in steel gray clouds that hung low over Chicago, promising either rain or snow before sunrise. The weather forecast played softly on a television mounted inside the office building's security lobby, but Ava Fisher barely glanced at it as she signed her name on the attendance sheet. She had learned that forecasts were like worries. There was no point carrying them before they arrived. "Evening, Ava," Frank the security guard called as she walked through the turnstile. "Evening." "You hear they're calling for 30-mile-an-hour winds tonight?" "I'll worry about that when I'm standing in them." Frank chuckled. "Fair enough." She pushed her cleaning cart toward the service elevator, humming quietly under her breath. The song had no words. It was simply a melody her mother used to whistle while washing dishes. Whenever Ava caught herself humming it, she didn't even realize she was doing it. On the 42nd floor, the office lights were still bright. Employees hurried through glass hallways carrying laptops, coffee cups, and conversations about deadlines. No one noticed the cleaning crew waiting patiently beside the service closet. That was normal. Invisible people learned not to expect eye contact. At precisely 6:45 p.m., Rick Donovan walked into the janitorial room, carrying a clipboard. Rick had managed the evening cleaning staff for nearly 6 years. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't especially kind either. He simply believed every problem had to be solved before the next shift arrived. He scanned the room. "We've got an issue." Everyone stopped unpacking supplies. "Melissa called in?" Several workers exchanged glances. Melissa Carter almost never missed work. Rick rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Her daughter's running a high fever. She had to stay home." Nobody complained. Parents understood parents. Rick continued. "We're already short 2 people because of vacation schedules." He looked down at his assignment sheet. "I need someone to cover the executive floors and conference center." Silence settled over the room. Everyone knew what that meant. Nearly 3 extra hours of work. More trash, more restrooms, more glass walls, more vacuuming. Rick looked around. "I'll pay overtime." No one volunteered. Several employees depended on the last bus home just as much as Ava did. One older janitor quietly shook his head. "I've got dialysis at 6 tomorrow." Another spoke up. "My wife doesn't drive." Someone else muttered that they had childcare waiting. Every excuse was real. Every reason mattered. Rick sighed. His eyes landed on Ava. "Ava." She looked up. "You know those floors better than anyone." She already understood where the conversation was going. "I need you to stay." Ava instinctively checked the wall clock. 6:49 p.m. If the additional work took as long as Rick expected, she would never make the 10:55 bus. She swallowed. "I catch the last Route 29? "I know." "If I miss it?" Rick nodded slowly. "I know." For several seconds, neither spoke. He wasn't threatening her. He genuinely looked trapped. "I've called everyone available," he finally said. "Nobody can come." Ava stared at the floor. She thought about Noah. She thought about Eleanor waiting at the apartment. She thought about the rent envelope sitting inside her kitchen drawer. $362 still missing before Friday. Then Rick quietly added something he hated saying. "Corporate has been asking me to reduce labor hours." Ava looked back up. "If I can't cover tonight, somebody's hours get cut next week." He didn't say whose. He didn't have to. Both of them knew. She asked softly, "Mine?" Rick didn't answer immediately. His silence answered for him. The overtime itself would help, but losing regular hours the following week would hurt even more. Ava closed her eyes for a brief moment. She wasn't deciding between convenience and sacrifice. She was choosing between 2 different kinds of hardship. "I'll do it," she finally said. Rick released a slow breath. "I owe you." "You don't." "I do." She offered a small smile. "Just don't make it a habit." "I won't." As Rick walked away, another cleaner touched Ava's shoulder. "You sure?" She nodded. "I'll figure something out." The word sounded more confident than she felt. At 7:30 p.m., her phone vibrated. A text from Eleanor. "Everything okay here?" Noah finished homework. "He wants to show you his science project later." Ava smiled. She typed back, "Tell him I can't wait." Then she slipped the phone back into her pocket and returned to work. The executive offices were unusually busy. Several department heads were preparing for a board meeting scheduled the following morning. Coffee cups multiplied, printers jammed, conference rooms emptied only to fill again minutes later. Every delay meant Ava couldn't begin cleaning. She couldn't vacuum while meetings continued. She couldn't disinfect desks while people were still working. So she waited. Waiting was something hourly workers never got paid enough for. By 8:40 p.m., she was already 20 minutes behind. She glanced toward the digital clock mounted outside conference room B. Time seemed louder tonight. Every minute echoed. 9:05, 9:18, 9:31. Employees slowly began leaving. Ava finally started wiping tables, collecting paper cups, straightening chairs. She moved quickly, but never carelessly. Her mother had always told her one thing. If you're going to do a job, let your name be remembered for doing it well, even if nobody actually knew her name. Around 9:50, Rick appeared again. I'm sorry. She looked up. What happened? The legal department stayed late. She turned toward the hallway. Sure enough, lights still glowed behind the frosted glass. There'll be another 30 minutes. 30 minutes. She didn't need a calculator. 30 minutes meant missing her normal schedule entirely. Rick looked miserable. If I could clean it myself, I would. I know. I'll talk to payroll. Make sure every minute counts. Ava simply nodded. Money wasn't what worried her. Transportation was. At 10:07, she slipped into the break room long enough to drink water. She opened the small notebook she always carried. Inside were numbers. Rent, electric bill, school lunch account. Noah's inhaler refill due next Tuesday. She quietly wrote today's overtime estimate in the margin. Plus $41, $75 before taxes, $41. Enough to buy another inhaler. Enough to help with rent. Enough to justify staying. She closed the notebook. As she reached for her jacket hanging on the back of the chair, her fingers automatically found the folded bus ticket. Still there. She unfolded it for a brief second, then carefully folded it again. Exactly in half. Always leave yourself a way home. She whispered the words almost unconsciously. Then she returned to work. The building gradually emptied. Vacuum cleaners echoed through long hallways. Glass reflected endless rows of office lights. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered beneath dark clouds. At 10:22, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Noah. She answered while changing the trash liner in a conference room. Hey, buddy. Mom. I'm here. You sound busy. A little. Are you still coming home? She looked toward the clock. 10:23. She forced warmth into her voice. Of course. You promise? I promise. I'll stay awake. You don't have to. I want to be the first one who says welcome home. Her eyes stung unexpectedly. I'll see you soon. I love you. I love you more. The call ended. Ava stood perfectly still for several seconds. She suddenly realized something. For the first time in almost a year, she wasn't sure she could keep that promise. Outside the office windows, the first cold drops of rain began sliding down the glass. By 10:30 p.m., the office tower had finally grown quiet. The elevators no longer chimed every few seconds. Computer monitors had gone dark one by one, and the polished hallways reflected nothing but rows of recessed ceiling lights stretching into the distance. For most people in the building, the workday had ended hours earlier. For Ava Fisher, the hardest part had only just begun. She pushed her cleaning cart into the executive conference center, glanced at the digital clock mounted above the emergency exit, and immediately calculated the minutes in her head. 10:31. If nothing else delayed her, she could still finish by 10:46. That would leave 9 minutes to reach the bus stop. Normally she needed 8. It would be close. Very close. She tightened her ponytail, slipped on a fresh pair of blue rubber gloves, and began wiping the 20-foot conference table with practiced efficiency. Each movement was smooth. Spray, wipe, dry, straighten chairs, empty trash, replace liners. She worked like someone who had repeated the same choreography hundreds of times. Her phone vibrated inside her pocket. She ignored it. One more chair, one more trash can. Then she finally looked. Eleanor. Ava answered immediately. Everything okay? Eleanor's voice was calm, but Ava could hear the television muted in the background instead of playing normally. Mostly. The word made Ava stop moving. What happened? Noah had a little coughing spell. Her heart tightened. How bad? He started wheezing after brushing his teeth. Ava closed her eyes, and I gave him 2 puffs from the inhaler. Did it help? Yes. A short pause followed. But Ava knew that word far too well. But what? The inhaler is almost empty. She looked toward the clock again. 10:34. 3 precious minutes had already slipped away. I thought the backup one was full. It is. But I think the school nurse accidentally sent yesterday's inhaler home instead of the new one. Ava pressed a hand against her forehead. She remembered. She had planned to stop by the pharmacy tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow, not tonight. How's Noah now? He's breathing better. Any fever? No. Can he talk normally? Yes. Relief washed over her, but only partially. Children with asthma could change quickly. Let me talk to him. A moment later, she heard tiny footsteps. Mom. Hey, buddy. I'm okay. I know. I scared Mrs. Brooks. Eleanor gently protested in the background. You didn't scare me, Noah continued. I just couldn't catch my breath for a minute. Ava forced herself to sound cheerful. Remember what the doctor says. Slow breaths. And no running around before bed. Exactly. He hesitated. You're coming home. The question arrived earlier tonight. She looked at the clock. 10:36. I am. Promise. Her throat tightened. I promise. I'll leave the hallway light on. You don't have to wait up. I want to. I know. I love you. I love you more. When the call ended, Ava remained motionless for several seconds. She knew she needed to move. Instead, she found herself staring through the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. The city looked peaceful from 42 stories above. Down below, tiny headlights flowed through the streets like ribbons of light. From this height, nobody could see how hard people were struggling. Everybody looked the same. She inhaled deeply. Then she started moving again, faster, much faster. Her gloves squeaked against polished wood. She emptied wastebaskets, 2 at a time. She stacked chairs with careful speed. Her shoulders already ached, but she refused to slow down. At 10:41, Rick Donovan entered the conference center. You still here? She looked up only briefly. Almost done. He noticed how quickly she was working. You don't have to rush that much. I do. He checked his watch. The bus? She nodded. Rick looked around the room. I'll handle the recycling bins. You don't have to. I know. He picked up 2 heavy bags anyway. Go finish the lobby. For the first time that evening, someone was helping her instead of giving her more work. Thank you. He shrugged. You covered for us tonight. Together, they finished in silence. At 10:46, Ava signed out her floor checklist. 1 minute later, she hurried toward the employee locker room. She peeled off the damp rubber gloves. Her fingertips were wrinkled from cleaning chemicals. A small tear near her thumb had allowed disinfectant onto her skin, leaving a reddish burn. She barely noticed. She grabbed her jacket, reached instinctively into the breast pocket, touched the folded ticket. Still there. Always there. She whispered under her breath. Leave yourself a way home. Then she ran. The service elevator seemed slower than ever before. Every stop felt personal. 42, 38, 31, 24. Someone entered on the 15th floor carrying boxes. I'm sorry, he said as the doors delayed another few seconds. It's okay. But inside, it wasn't okay. The elevator reached the lobby at 10:50. 5 minutes. She sprinted through the security desk. Frank looked up. Good night." She waved without slowing. The cold air outside slapped her face immediately. Rain had become a steady drizzle, driven sideways by powerful gusts of wind. She pulled her hood over her head and ran. Across Wacker Drive, past the coffee shop already closing, past 2 food delivery cyclists waiting for orders. Her sneakers splashed through shallow puddles. She checked the traffic signal. Red. No cars. She crossed anyway. 10:52. Her lungs burned. She wasn't young enough to sprint several city blocks after a 10-hour shift, but mothers often found strength in places exhaustion couldn't reach. Halfway to the bus stop, her phone rang again. Eleanor. She answered while still running. "What happened?" "No panic," Eleanor said quickly. "I just wanted to let you know Noah's asleep." Ava slowed only enough to breathe. "He fell asleep." "Finally. How's his breathing?" "Much steadier." Relief softened her pace for only a heartbeat. "I'm almost at the stop." "Be careful." "I will." She hung up. 10:54. The familiar street lamp came into view. The bus stop stood just beyond it, empty, no passengers waiting. Good. Maybe she had made it. She pushed harder. The folded ticket bounced gently inside her pocket with every stride. One more block, one more crosswalk. She could already imagine stepping aboard, nodding politely to Tom Gallagher, collapsing into her usual seat, and calling home to tell Noah she was coming. Then she heard it. The deep rumble of a diesel engine. Her eyes lifted toward the intersection. Route 29. The last bus. Its headlights swept across the wet pavement as it pulled away from the curb. For a split second, hope remained. Maybe the traffic light ahead would stay red. Maybe Tom would still see her. Maybe the light turned green. The bus accelerated. Ava ran harder than she had in years. "Wait!" Her voice disappeared beneath the wind. The distance between them grew by only a few feet. Then another few. Her shoes slipped briefly on wet concrete, but she caught herself before falling. She reached the bus stop just in time to see the taillights becoming smaller as the bus disappeared around the next corner. Silence settled over the empty shelter. Rain tapped softly against the plastic bench. Ava bent forward, both hands on her knees, struggling to catch her breath. Her phone screen lit up. 11:15. Almost without thinking, she knew what would happen next. Noah would wake. He would reach for the phone, and he would ask the same question he asked every single night. "Mom, are you on your way?" The bus stop felt strangely empty after the last bus disappeared. Only a thin sheet of rain drifted beneath the street lamp, turning the pavement into a mirror that reflected yellow light and lonely silence. Ava Fisher remained standing exactly where she had stopped running. Her chest still rose and fell rapidly from the sprint across downtown. Drops of rain slid from the edge of her hood onto her cheeks, mixing with sweat, until she could no longer tell one from the other. She looked down the street. Nothing. No headlights, no second bus, no miracle. She reached into her jacket pocket and wrapped her fingers around the folded bus ticket. For the first time since her mother had taught her the ritual, the ticket could no longer take her home. Her phone buzzed. 11:15. Right on time. She already knew who it was before the screen lit up. Noah. She answered immediately. "Hi, sweetheart." His sleepy voice sounded smaller than usual. "Mom." "I'm here." "Are you on your way?" The question pierced straight through her heart. She opened her mouth. No words came out. She stared at the empty street. Finally, she forced herself to speak. "I'm trying." A brief silence followed. Children often understood more than adults expected. "You missed the bus." She closed her eyes. "Yes." Another pause. Then Noah asked the question she had feared. "How are you coming home?" She didn't know. Rideshare prices after 11 o'clock often cost nearly $40. She couldn't afford that. The train station sat nearly 2 miles away, and even then it wouldn't take her close enough to the apartment. Walking through unfamiliar neighborhoods after midnight wasn't safe. I'll figure it out. You always do. His innocent confidence almost broke her. I love you. I love you too. I'm gonna keep the hallway light on. You don't have to. I know, but I want you to see it when you come home. Ava swallowed hard. I will. After the call ended, she stood motionless beneath the rain. She wasn't crying. She simply couldn't think. Every possible solution ended the same way. Too expensive. Too dangerous. Too slow. Her phone battery showed 19%. She opened the CTA app. No more buses. No alternate routes. Service resumed at 4:48 a.m., almost 5 hours away. She looked toward the bench inside the shelter. For one impossible second, she imagined sitting there until morning. Then she pictured Noah waking repeatedly through the night, checking the hallway, wondering why his mother never came home. No, that wasn't an option. She scrolled through her contacts. There weren't many. Eleanor, Rick, Frank, the pharmacy, school, no relatives, no close friends with cars. Her thumb stopped over Rick's number. No, there was nothing he could do. She sighed. Then another name came to mind. CTA customer service? No, too late. Then she remembered something Frank had once mentioned. Night dispatch. She searched online. CTA operations dispatch. A number appeared. She hesitated. Why would they help? The bus had already left. Drivers weren't allowed to reverse routes. She knew that much. Still. Her thumb pressed the call button. 3 rings. 4. A woman answered. CTA operations. This is Linda. Ava straightened instinctively. Hi, I'm sorry to bother you. No problem, ma'am. How can I help? My name is Ava Fisher. Linda waited patiently. I missed the last Route 29. I'm sorry. I know there isn't another bus. I'm afraid there isn't. I understand. Another pause. Linda expected the call to end. Instead, Ava quietly asked, Could you tell me if there's any safe way to get home from here? Linda opened a transit map. What intersection are you at? Ava answered. Linda studied the screen. The nearest overnight train station is about 2 miles east. I see. You'd have to transfer twice. Ava mentally added the walking distance afterward. It would take nearly 2 hours. She thanked the dispatcher anyway. I appreciate your help. Just before hanging up, Linda heard something in Ava's breathing. Not panic, not anger, exhaustion. Ma'am? Yes. Are you all right? Ava looked once more at the empty street. I'll manage. Linda had worked dispatch for 15 years. She had learned to recognize voices. This one sounded like someone who had spent years carrying too much without asking for anything. What kept you at work? I had mandatory overtime. I'm sorry. It's okay. No, it isn't. The unexpected kindness caught Ava off guard. She laughed softly. I suppose not. Linda glanced at another monitor displaying bus locations. Route 29 had not yet completed its outbound loop. Technically, the driver remained on duty. A thought crossed her mind. Policy immediately pushed it away. Drivers could never be instructed to return for a missed passenger. Never. Still, she found herself asking another question. Is someone waiting for you? Ava looked toward the rain. My little boy. How old? 8. Is he alone? No. Our neighbor is with him. Linda relaxed slightly. Then Ava quietly added, almost apologetically, he has asthma. The dispatcher remained silent. He always calls at 11:15. I answered. He asked if I was coming home. I'm sorry. So am I. Linda's hand rested above the radio microphone connected to the bus network. She knew exactly what policy required. End the call. Document passenger inquiry. Offer alternate transportation information. Nothing more. Instead, she asked one final question. If you could tell the driver one thing, what would it be? Ava frowned. I don't understand. Hypothetically, Ava looked down at the folded ticket in her hand. Rain had dampened one corner. She carefully smoothed it flat with her thumb. Then she whispered the only truth she had left. Please don't ask him to come back. Linda blinked. What? Don't tell him to break the rules. Her voice cracked slightly. Just, if you happen to speak with him. She struggled to finish the sentence. Tell him my little boy keeps waiting by the hallway light because he can't fall asleep until he knows his mom is coming home. Silence filled the line. Ava continued. I don't want special treatment. Another long pause. I just wanted someone else to know why missing one bus matters. Linda closed her eyes. For several seconds, she couldn't answer. Finally, she said quietly, Please stay where you are. I will. And keep your phone with you. I only have 17% battery. That's enough. Linda ended the call. Then she stared at the radio microphone. Every dispatcher memorized the rule during training. Radio traffic existed for operational safety, not personal messages, not emotional appeals, not exceptions. She knew that. She also knew that bus 29 was still less than 3 miles away. Driver ID 742. Thomas Gallagher. 28 years of service. Excellent record. She exhaled slowly. Then, before she had time to reconsider, she pressed the transmit button. Route 29, this is dispatch. Static crackled. Then Tom's calm voice answered. Go ahead, dispatch. Linda looked once more at the incident log. She carefully chose every word. There was a passenger inquiry regarding your previous stop. Tom glanced automatically into the rearview mirror while keeping both hands on the steering wheel. Copy. Linda hesitated. Then, abandoning the script she had followed for 15 years, she quietly said, The passenger asked me not to request that you return. Tom frowned. Understood? Linda's voice grew softer. She only wanted me to tell someone that her 8-year-old son is waiting by the hallway light because he can't sleep until his mother gets home. Silence. The only sound inside the bus was the engine humming beneath the floor. Tom's eyes slowly lifted toward the rearview mirror. His grip tightened around the steering wheel. And for the first time in many years, a memory he had spent decades trying to bury came rushing back. Inside Route 29, the radio fell silent. The windshield wipers swept steadily across the rain-streaked glass. Thomas Gallagher kept both hands on the steering wheel, but his mind had already traveled 23 years into the past. It had been another rainy night. Not in Chicago, in Milwaukee. His wife Margaret had been driving home after finishing a late nursing shift. A tractor trailer jackknifed across an icy overpass. Traffic froze for miles. Emergency vehicles struggled to reach the scene. Margaret survived the crash itself. She didn't survive the delay. The doctors later told Tom that if help had reached her just a few minutes sooner, the outcome might have been different. Only a few minutes. For 23 years, those words had followed him everywhere. A few minutes. He blinked hard and forced himself back to the present. Dispatch had not ordered him to return. Linda had been careful. She had simply delivered a message. An 8-year-old boy was waiting beside a hallway light because he couldn't sleep until his mother came home. Tom looked into the large rear-view mirror. Marcus Reed sat near the back with his work boots stretched into the aisle. Emily Dawson leaned against the window, reading something on her phone between hospital shifts. 3 college students whispered over headphones. An elderly man slept lightly near the front. Everyone expected the bus to continue forward. Tom's eyes drifted toward the digital clock above the dashboard. 11:19 p.m. company policy was clear. Drivers could never reverse a route to retrieve a passenger who had missed a stop. Not because the company lacked compassion. Because once exceptions began, consistency disappeared. Schedules failed, connections were missed, liability increased. He understood every reason. He had followed the rules for 28 years. His performance file was nearly spotless. He had never been suspended, never received a major complaint, never intentionally ignored policy. Yet tonight, he kept hearing one sentence: "Don't ask him to come back." She wasn't asking for a favor. She wasn't demanding special treatment. She simply wanted someone else to know why one missed bus mattered. Tom slowly eased his foot off the accelerator. The bus began losing speed. Marcus looked up. Something felt different. The bus wasn't approaching a stop. It was simply slowing. Tom inhaled deeply. Then he pressed the radio button. "Dispatch." Linda answered almost immediately. "Go ahead, 29. His voice remained calm. "If I make a discretionary safety stop, approximately 3 blocks behind my current position." She closed her eyes. She knew exactly what he was asking. "I cannot instruct you to do that." "I understand." Several seconds passed. Then Linda answered, using the only words policy allowed. "You are responsible for decisions made in the interest of passenger safety." "No more, no less." Tom nodded once. "Copy." He switched off the radio. His hands tightened around the wheel. He activated the left turn signal. Then, at the next legal intersection, he carefully turned the 40-foot bus around. Marcus immediately frowned. "Hey!" The bus continued through the intersection. A college student looked up from his phone. "Are we detouring?" Emily quietly watched the driver without saying anything. Nobody spoke for several moments. Then Marcus stood. "Driver." Tom kept his eyes on the road. "We'll be delayed a couple of minutes." "For what?" Tom didn't answer. Marcus looked around. "This isn't the route." The elderly gentleman near the front opened one eye. "Everything all right?" "Yes, sir." Tom's voice remained steady. "We'll continue shortly." Rain drummed harder against the windshield. 3 minutes later, the familiar bus shelter appeared beneath the street lamp. A lone figure stood there. Hood soaked, shoulders slumped, one hand wrapped around a folded bus ticket. Tom gently pulled the bus to the curb. The doors folded open with their familiar hiss. Ava stared in disbelief. For a second, she couldn't move. She looked from the open doors to the driver, then back again. She slowly climbed aboard, breathing hard from the cold air. Water dripped from her jacket onto the rubber floor. She struggled to find words. "I'm sorry." Tom looked at her kindly. "You don't need to apologize. I made you come back." He shook his head. "No. You weren't supposed to." "I know." She reached automatically for her fare card. Tom quietly raised one hand. "You already paid tonight." She looked confused. Go ahead and sit down." Her eyes filled with tears she had been holding back for hours. Not dramatic tears, just quiet ones, the kind born from overwhelming relief. "Thank you." She hesitated before adding softly, "Thank you for giving me a way home." The words caught Tom completely off guard. He remembered the dispatcher's message. Hallway light, little boy, waiting. Now this, a way home. He nodded once. "You're welcome." Ava walked slowly toward her usual seat. The entire bus remained unusually silent. Marcus watched her pass. Her shoes were soaked. Her hands trembled from cold and exhaustion. The canvas work bag on her shoulder sagged heavily. She didn't look like someone trying to take advantage of anyone. She looked like someone trying very hard not to fall apart. Tom closed the doors. The bus resumed its route. Nobody spoke for almost a full minute. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. You turned the whole bus around for one passenger. His tone wasn't angry, mostly confused. Tom answered honestly. I did. Marcus frowned. That's against the rules. It probably is. You could get written up. I know. You've got people trying to get home too. Tom glanced briefly into the mirror. I know. Marcus folded his arms. So why? Tom didn't respond. Not because he was hiding anything. Because he didn't yet have words simple enough to explain 23 years of regret. Emily looked from Marcus to the driver, then quietly toward Ava. The young nurse noticed details other people often missed. The faded company logo on Ava's uniform, the chemical burn across her thumb, the tired circles beneath her eyes, the folded ticket resting in her lap. She had seen that expression before. Parents leaving pediatric intensive care units, family members sleeping in hospital waiting rooms, people carrying far more than anyone else realized. She spoke softly. Maybe there was a reason. Marcus sighed. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying. Emily smiled gently. And I don't think anyone's going to lose 3 minutes of sleep because we gave someone else a chance to get home. A few passengers nodded almost imperceptibly. The tension inside the bus eased. Outside rain continued washing the city streets. Inside, warmth slowly returned. Ava rested both hands around the folded ticket. She finally allowed herself one deep breath. Then she reached for her phone. Battery, 12%. Enough. She called home. Eleanor answered immediately. Ava? I'm on the bus. Oh, thank goodness. Is Noah asleep? He woke up twice. Can I? Before she finished, she heard little footsteps. Mom? His sleepy voice sounded thick with exhaustion. I'm coming home. 3 simple words. The same 3 words she had spoken every night. Tonight, they carried entirely different meaning. Noah smiled so widely that Ava could hear it through the phone. I left the hallway light on. I know. I waited. I know. I'll be there soon. Okay. I love you. I love you more. When the call ended, Ava quietly wiped away a single tear before anyone else could notice. But Tom had already seen it in the rearview mirror. And somehow, he knew he would willingly explain his decision to every supervisor in the city if it meant that one little hallway light would not stay on until morning. The bus rolled steadily through the rain, its engine humming beneath the quiet conversations that slowly returned after the unexpected detour. Outside downtown Chicago shimmered under wet streets and reflected traffic lights. Inside, the atmosphere had changed, not dramatically. Just enough for everyone to realize they had shared something unusual. Ava remained seated near the middle of the bus, both hands wrapped around the folded ticket resting on her lap. Her breathing had finally returned to normal, but exhaustion still weighed heavily across her shoulders. She looked toward the front. Tom Gallagher drove exactly as he always had, calm, focused, professional. If someone had boarded the bus only moments ago, they never would have guessed the driver had just broken a company policy that could jeopardize nearly 3 decades of spotless service. Emily Dawson finally stood and walked a few steps toward Ava. May I sit here? Ava looked up. Of course. Emily smiled and settled into the empty seat beside her. I'm Emily. Ava. I know this might sound strange, she hesitated, but are you all right? Ava managed a tired smile. I think so. You looked terrified back there. I was, Emily nodded. I've seen that look before. You work in healthcare. Ava noticed the hospital badge clipped to Emily's jacket. Emergency room. I thought so. Emily laughed softly. Occupational hazard. We notice people. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The bus crossed another intersection. Rain continued tapping gently against the windows. Finally, Emily asked, "Was someone waiting for you?" Ava looked down at the folded ticket again. "My son." "The little boy?" She nodded. "His name is Noah." "How old?" "8." Emily smiled. "My nephew's 8. They ask a lot of questions." "They do." Ava laughed quietly for the first time that evening. "And somehow they always ask the hardest ones." Emily's expression softened. "The hallway light." Ava blinked. "You heard?" "The driver left the radio speaker on for a second." "I wasn't trying to make anyone feel sorry for me. I know." "I only—" Her voice faded. "I only wanted someone to understand." Emily nodded. "I think they did." She glanced toward the front of the bus. "Especially him." Ava followed her gaze toward Tom. "He didn't have to do that." "No." "He could get into trouble." "Probably." Ava stared silently through the windshield. "I don't even know how to thank someone for something like this." Near the back of the bus, Marcus Reed shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had spent the last several minutes replaying the scene in his mind. When the bus first turned around, all he had seen was a rule being broken. Now he had watched the woman quietly thanking her little boy over the phone. He had seen the chemical burns on her hands. He had noticed the worn knees of her work pants. He had overheard enough. He stood and slowly walked toward the front. "Driver?" Tom glanced briefly into the mirror. "Yes." Marcus scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. He sighed. "I came on a little strong back there." Tom kept his eyes on the road. "It's all right." "No." Marcus shook his head. "It wasn't." He looked briefly toward Ava. "I didn't know." Tom answered gently. "You couldn't." Marcus nodded once before returning to his seat. Sometimes apologies didn't require long speeches, only honesty. The silence that followed felt much lighter. After another minute, Emily quietly asked Tom from the front of the bus, "Can I ask you something?" "As long as it doesn't distract me." "What made you turn around?" Tom didn't answer immediately. The question deserved more than a simple sentence. Finally, he spoke. "My wife was a nurse." Emily straightened slightly. "So am I." "She worked nights." Another pause. "Years ago, she was in a serious accident." Nobody on the bus spoke. Even Marcus listened. "The ambulance got delayed." Tom's voice remained steady, but something deeper echoed beneath it. "Not by much." He kept watching the road. "Just a few minutes." The windshield wipers swept across the glass. Back and forth. Back and forth. "The doctors told me she probably would have survived if help had arrived sooner." The bus became completely silent. "I've spent 23 years thinking about those few minutes." No one interrupted. Tom continued quietly. "Tonight, dispatch told me about a little boy waiting by a hallway light." He smiled sadly. "I couldn't stop thinking." He paused. Maybe tonight those few minutes could mean something different. No grand speech followed. None was necessary. Emily looked out the side window, blinking rapidly. Marcus lowered his head. Even the college students removed one earbud each. Some stories naturally demanded silence. Ava felt tears gathering again. She hadn't known. She whispered just loudly enough for Tom to hear. "I'm so sorry." He nodded once. "So am I." The bus continued south. A few minutes later, Emily turned back toward Ava. "Can I ask another question?" "Sure." "What's with the ticket?" Ava smiled faintly. "This—" She unfolded it carefully before folding it back in exactly the same place. "My mother always folded every bus ticket like this." Emily watched curiously. "Why?" "She used to tell me—" Ava's smile grew softer. "Always leave yourself a way home." Emily repeated the words quietly. That's beautiful. I didn't understand them when I was 16. And now? Now I think she meant more than buses. Emily nodded. I think you're right. Ava looked around the bus. Tonight I almost believed I'd lost my way home. She glanced toward Tom. Then someone else carried it for me. The words lingered in the warm air inside the bus. Nobody responded immediately. Sometimes the truest sentences needed room to settle. The route finally entered Ava's neighborhood. Streetlights became farther apart. Apartment buildings replaced office towers. Small grocery stores sat dark behind metal security gates. Tom slowed toward the familiar stop. Before opening the doors, he looked briefly into the mirror. We're here. Ava stood. Her legs felt strangely weak, not from running anymore, from everything that had happened afterward. She adjusted the canvas bag on her shoulder. Then she walked to the front. For a second, she simply stood there. No words seemed large enough. Finally, she reached into her pocket. She unfolded the bus ticket one last time, then folded it neatly in half again. My mother always said this meant I'd never forget how to get home. Tom smiled gently. Sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. Ava looked directly at him. Tonight, because of you, she swallowed. My son won't remember the night his mother didn't come home. Tom lowered his eyes briefly. That's enough thanks for me. She nodded. Before stepping off the bus, she quietly extended her hand. He shook it. Her palm was rough from years of cleaning chemicals. His was weathered from decades gripping a steering wheel. Two ordinary people, neither wealthy, neither famous, both carrying invisible scars. Good night, Mr. Gallagher. Good night, Miss Fisher. And thank you. She stepped into the rain. As the bus pulled away, Tom watched through the mirror while Ava hurried toward a small apartment building at the end of the block. On the third floor, a hallway light glowed warmly through a narrow window. He smiled. Somewhere upstairs, an 8-year-old boy was about to stop waiting. The hallway light was still glowing when Ava climbed the final flight of stairs. Her legs ached after nearly 12 hours of work. The desperate run through downtown, and the emotional weight of everything that had happened since missing the bus. Even so, she found herself climbing faster as she reached the third floor. Apartment 3C stood slightly open. Warm yellow light spilled into the hallway. Before Ava could knock, the door swung wide. Noah threw his arms around her waist with surprising strength. You came home. His voice echoed down the quiet hallway. Ava knelt immediately despite the soreness in her knees and wrapped both arms around him. I told you I would. I knew you would. He buried his face against her damp jacket. You smell like rain. She laughed softly. And cleaning spray. And rain. She kissed the top of his head. I think you're right. Behind them, Eleanor Brooks smiled with visible relief. I was beginning to think I'd have to make another pot of tea. Ava stood and embraced the older woman. Thank you for staying. You've thanked me 100 times. I'll thank you 100 more. Eleanor noticed the tears still lingering in Ava's eyes. Everything all right? Ava glanced at Noah. Can we talk after I get him into bed? Of course. Inside the apartment, nothing had changed. The small kitchen still smelled faintly of vegetable soup. Noah's science project remained spread across the dining table, complete with construction paper planets suspended by thin pieces of thread. His tiny sneakers sat neatly beside the front door. Ordinary things. Tonight they looked extraordinary. Sometimes home became more beautiful after nearly losing the chance to reach it. Noah tugged gently at her hand. I stayed awake. I noticed. I wasn't scared. You weren't. A little. He looked down. But Mrs. Brooks said you'd find a way. Ava smiled toward Eleanor. She was right. Noah suddenly looked curious. What happened to the bus? Ava removed her soaked jacket and hung it near the radiator. I missed it. His eyes widened. The last one? Yes. Then how did you get home? She hesitated. Some stories could wait until morning. Others deserved to be told immediately. A bus driver came back. Noah blinked. He came back for you. He did. Because you forgot something. No. Because you were sick. No. He thought for another moment. Because he was kind. Ava felt her throat tighten. Yes. Just because. Noah nodded as though the answer made perfect sense. Children often accepted kindness more naturally than adults. He smiled. Then tomorrow we should say thank you. Ava gently brushed his hair back from his forehead. I wish I could. You don't know where he lives? She laughed. No, we'll think of something. She tucked him into bed 20 minutes later. His breathing sounded much steadier than it had over the phone earlier that evening. She checked the inhaler beside the bed. Almost empty. Tomorrow's first stop would have to be the pharmacy, no matter what. Noah reached beneath his pillow and pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper. I made something. For me. He nodded, while waiting for you. Ava unfolded the drawing. A child had sketched a stick figure standing beneath a bright yellow light. Another stick figure walked toward him through blue lines of rain. Above them in large, uneven letters, Noah had written, Mom comes home. Ava stared silently at the picture. No expensive gift could ever equal the value of a child's certainty. She kissed his forehead. I love it. You can take it to work. I think I will. So you don't forget. I never could. Within minutes, Noah drifted asleep. His small hand still rested loosely on the blanket. Ava quietly switched off the bedroom lamp, leaving only the hallway light glowing outside the partially open door. The same light that had waited for her. When she returned to the kitchen, Eleanor poured 2 cups of hot tea. I've been keeping yours warm. Thank you. They sat across from each other at the tiny table. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Eleanor asked, what really happened? Ava told her everything. The overtime, missing the bus, calling dispatch, the conversation with Linda, the unexpected return, Tom Gallagher, the passengers. She repeated nearly every detail. When she finished, Eleanor quietly removed her reading glasses. I've lived 72 years. Ava waited. I've discovered something. What? People usually remember the worst thing someone did to them. She took another sip of tea. But once in a great while, she smiled. Someone does something so unexpectedly kind that it outweighs years of disappointment. Ava looked toward Noah's bedroom. I don't know if he realizes what he did. He probably doesn't. I want him to. Eleanor nodded. Then tell him. I don't know how. The truth usually works. Ava smiled faintly. You're good at this. I'm old. Same thing. Both women laughed quietly. The apartment finally felt peaceful. Outside rain continued falling against the windows. Inside, warmth slowly returned to Ava's tired body. Across town, however, another night was only beginning. At the CTA Operations Building, Tom Gallagher parked Route 29 inside the garage. The maintenance crew climbed aboard for routine inspection. Tom completed his post-route paperwork exactly as he had thousands of times before. Mileage, fuel level, mechanical notes. Nothing unusual, except one line. Route deviation. Company policy required every unscheduled change to be documented. Tom stared at the blank field for nearly a minute. He could leave it empty. Perhaps no one would notice. The GPS almost certainly would. He could invent a traffic obstruction. The cameras would contradict him. Instead, he wrote exactly 7 words. Returned to retrieve stranded passenger after assessment. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic. Simply true. He signed his name, folded the report, placed it inside the supervisor's inbox. As he turned to leave, another driver approached. Tom. Hey, Mike. You all right? I think so. You look like you've had a long shift. Tom smiled. I've had a meaningful one. Mike laughed. Those are usually the longest. Tom nodded. They usually are. Meanwhile, inside the dispatch office, Linda Chavez closed her headset locker. She should have gone home 15 minutes earlier. Instead, she remained staring at the call log on her computer. Passenger inquiry, 11:17 p.m. No policy violation officially appeared. Yet she knew the supervisors would review the route deviation in the morning. They would listen to radio recordings. They would ask questions. She accepted that. Some decisions refused to fit neatly inside procedure manuals. Before leaving, she quietly opened a blank notebook she kept inside her desk drawer. It wasn't an official journal, just a place where she occasionally wrote about nights she never wanted to forget. She picked up a pen, then wrote one sentence. Tonight, I remembered that dispatching buses is also sometimes about bringing people home. She closed the notebook, turned off the desk lamp, and walked into the rainy Chicago night wondering what tomorrow's conversations would bring. Somewhere across the city, 3 different people prepared for sleep. A tired single mother, an aging bus driver, a dispatcher who had bent closer to compassion than procedure. None of them realized that by sunrise, one unexpected decision would begin traveling far beyond a rainy bus stop. Tuesday morning began much earlier than usual for Tom Gallagher. Although his shift would not start until the afternoon, he arrived at the CTA operations building before 8 o'clock, carrying the same worn leather lunch bag he had used for nearly 20 years. The security guard looked surprised. You're early. Tom smiled politely. I figured I shouldn't keep anyone waiting. The guard understood immediately. They've already called a meeting. I thought they might. Tom thanked him and continued toward the administrative offices. He wasn't nervous. Not exactly. He simply knew there would be consequences. Meanwhile, across the city, Ava Fisher woke after less than 5 hours of sleep. The alarm buzzed at 5:45 a.m. For one wonderful second, she forgot everything that had happened. Then she saw Noah's drawing resting on the kitchen table. Mom comes home. She smiled. The memory returned all at once. The missed bus, the dispatcher, the driver, the ride home. She carefully folded Noah's drawing and slipped it into the same notebook where she kept her monthly budget. Some memories deserved protection. Noah shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. Morning. Morning, sleepyhead. He climbed onto his chair. Did you really miss the last bus? I really did. And the driver really came back. He really did. Noah thought quietly while eating oatmeal. Finally, he asked, Does he have kids? I don't know. If he does? He stirred his spoon slowly. I hope someone helps them too. Ava looked at her son for a long moment. Children often offered wisdom without realizing it. I hope so too. After walking Noah to school and stopping at the pharmacy for his inhaler refill, Ava boarded another Route 29 into downtown. Everything looked ordinary again. Office workers carried coffee. Cyclists hurried through traffic. Construction crews shouted across sidewalks. The city had already moved on. Only a handful of people knew something unusual had happened the night before. At CTA headquarters, Tom sat across from operations supervisor David Miller. David had supervised bus operations for almost 15 years. His reputation was fair, but firm. He placed Tom's route report on the desk. I read this twice. Tom nodded. I figured you would. David folded his hands. Tell me what happened. Tom described everything from beginning to end. No embellishment, no excuses. He explained the dispatch call, the stranded passenger, the little boy waiting at home, the legal turnaround, the additional 3-minute delay. When he finished, David remained silent for several moments. Finally, he asked, "Did dispatch instruct you to return?" "No." "Did anyone order you to leave your assigned route?" "No." "So the decision was entirely yours?" "Yes." David leaned back. "You understand our policy?" "I do." "And you knowingly violated it?" Tom answered honestly. "Yes." Silence settled over the office. David removed his glasses. "I've known you for 12 years. Tom waited. "I've never had to question your judgment before." "I appreciate that. So, help me understand." Tom looked through the office window toward rows of parked buses outside. "I spent a long time wondering whether I was making an emotional decision. And I realized I was." David raised an eyebrow. "That's usually not what I want to hear." Tom smiled faintly. "I know. But I also believe it was the right one." David studied him carefully. What if every driver did the same thing? They shouldn't. "What made this different?" Tom answered without hesitation. "I was the last safe way home." The room fell quiet again. David had expected many arguments: compassion, common sense, discretion. Instead, he heard something much simpler: the last safe way home. Before either man could continue, someone knocked on the office door. David looked up. "Come in." Linda Chavez stepped inside, carrying a folder. "You asked for the dispatch recording?" "I did." She placed the folder on his desk. David looked toward her. "Were you involved?" Linda nodded. "I answered the passenger's call." "You transmitted to the driver?" "Yes." "Why?" Linda remained standing. "Because I believed the information was relevant." David opened the transcript. He read the exchange silently, then looked back at Linda. "You were very careful with your wording." "I tried to remain within policy." "You also chose to include the child's message?" "Yes." "Why?" Linda took a slow breath. "Because the driver deserved to know why one missed bus mattered." No one spoke. Finally, David sighed. "I need a few minutes." Tom stood. "Whatever decision you make." David interrupted gently. "Sit down." Tom sat again. Meanwhile, life continued outside those office walls. Emily Dawson finished her hospital shift just before 9 in the morning. While changing out of her scrubs, she couldn't stop thinking about the bus ride. She mentioned it to another nurse. "I saw something unusual last night." "What happened?" "A driver turned around for a stranded mother." The other nurse smiled. "Really?" Emily nodded. "I don't know what happens next." She looked out the locker room window. But I hope he doesn't regret it." At almost the same moment, Marcus Reed unloaded steel beams at a construction site. During coffee break, he found himself telling coworkers the same story. "I was mad at first." "What changed?" Marcus shrugged. "I actually looked at her." His friend frowned. "What do you mean, I mean?" Marcus searched for the right words. "Sometimes we decide who people are before we ever really see them." Back at CTA headquarters, David finally broke the silence. "There are 2 issues here." Tom nodded. "The first is policy." "And the second," David tapped the report lightly. "Judgment?" Tom waited. "I cannot ignore the policy violation." "I understand." "There will be a formal written reprimand placed in your file." Tom accepted that immediately. "All right." Linda looked disappointed but unsurprised. Then David continued. "However," both Tom and Linda looked up. I also reviewed the GPS timing." He slid another document across the desk. "The total delay to the route was 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Tom remained silent. "No connecting buses were missed." No passenger complaints have been filed. He looked toward Linda. Did dispatch receive any complaints? None. David nodded slowly. I've also spent the last hour asking myself a question. Neither answered. What exactly is the purpose of public transportation? Tom looked down. David answered it himself. Schedules matter. He pointed toward another document. Consistency matters. Then he looked directly at Tom. But so do people. The office became very quiet. I'm issuing the reprimand because policy requires it. Tom nodded respectfully. But I'm also forwarding this incident to the Policy Review Committee. Tom blinked. I'm sorry. David folded his hands. If our rules leave no room whatsoever for extraordinary circumstances. He paused. Perhaps we should examine the rules as carefully as we examine the people who follow them. Linda looked genuinely surprised. Tom simply sat quietly. He had arrived expecting punishment. He had not expected a conversation. As the meeting ended, David handed Tom the signed paperwork. I'm not telling you that what you did was officially correct. Tom accepted the document. I know. I'm telling you. David smiled faintly. That some decisions deserve more discussion than discipline. Tom left the office carrying the written reprimand inside a plain manila envelope. It would remain in his employment file. He accepted that. Yet, as he stepped outside into the cool morning air, he found himself thinking less about the paper in his hands, and more about a small apartment where for the first time in many years, a hallway light had not burned until sunrise. The story might have ended with a mother reaching home safely. Instead, it quietly began again. 3 days passed. Life returned to its familiar rhythm. Ava continued cleaning office buildings through the night. Noah returned to school with his new inhaler tucked carefully inside his backpack. Tom drove Route 29 exactly as he always had. The written reprimand remained inside his personnel file. Nothing appeared different. Yet invisible things had already begun to move. On Friday afternoon, Sarah Whitmore sat inside a neighborhood coffee shop searching for a local human interest story. For nearly 15 years, she had reported for a Chicago television station. She had covered elections, blizzards, fires, charity drives, and city council meetings. Lately, however, she felt exhausted by headlines filled only with conflict. People still needed the truth, but they also needed reminders that goodness still existed. Her phone vibrated. A message from an emergency room nurse she had interviewed months earlier. Emily Dawson. Emily rarely contacted reporters. Sarah opened the message. You should look into what happened on Route 29 Monday night. No exaggeration followed, no dramatic claims. Only one sentence. A bus driver broke policy to bring a single mother home. Sarah frowned with curiosity. She replied immediately. What happened? Within minutes, Emily sent back a brief explanation along with the route number and approximate time. Sarah read it twice, then 3 times. Most stories became less interesting after additional facts emerged. This one became more interesting. Instead of calling CTA first, she contacted Emily. I don't want rumors. You won't get any. Were you actually there? I was. Would you be willing to speak on camera? If the driver agrees. Sarah smiled. Fair answer. Next, she searched social media. There were no viral videos, no dramatic cell phone footage, only one short post from Marcus Reed. Some rules matter. Some people matter more. Proud of the bus driver I met Monday night. 37 likes. 4 comments. That was all. Sarah appreciated that. Stories driven by truth often began quietly. She called Marcus. I saw your post. I didn't think anyone would. Can you tell me what happened? Marcus repeated everything honestly, including his own initial criticism. I thought he was wrong. And now, Marcus laughed softly. Now I think I judged too fast." Sarah wrote that sentence down. It sounded real, not rehearsed, not polished. Real. That afternoon, she contacted CTA's communications office requesting comment. Within an hour, she received a polite response. The agency confirmed an internal review regarding an unscheduled route deviation, but declined further details because it involved personnel matters. No denial, no accusation. Interesting. Finally, Sarah asked one question. "May I contact the driver directly?" After some hesitation, they provided Tom's work contact information. Tom answered during his break. "My name is Sarah Whitmore. I know who you are. I'm hoping to ask about Monday night." Tom smiled faintly. "I figured someone eventually would. Would you be willing to talk? I'd rather not make this about me." "It doesn't have to be." Silence lingered. Sarah understood people like Tom. The harder they tried to avoid attention, the more likely their motives were genuine. What if the story encourages someone else to help another person? Tom considered that. Finally, he answered, "I'll speak. But only if the mother agrees too." Sarah thanked him. Finding Ava proved more difficult. She wasn't on social media. Her phone number was private. Eventually, Emily connected them through Eleanor Brooks. That evening, Sarah visited Ava's apartment. No camera crew, no bright lights, only a notebook. Ava opened the door cautiously. "Miss Fisher?" "Yes." "I'm Sarah Whitmore." "I know. I promise I'm not here to make your life complicated." Ava hesitated before inviting her inside. Noah sat at the dining table coloring another picture. When Sarah noticed the drawing, she smiled. A bus, a driver waving, a hallway light. Children remembered what adults overlooked. Sarah spent nearly an hour listening. She asked careful questions. She rarely interrupted. She learned about Noah's asthma, the overtime shift, the folded bus ticket, the promise every night, the hallway light. When Ava finished, Sarah quietly closed her notebook. "Can I ask one last question?" "Sure. Why did you tell dispatch not to ask him to come back?" Ava looked genuinely surprised. "Because it wasn't his responsibility. You were stranded. I know. You had every reason to ask." Ava shook her head. "He has rules. And your son?" "My son is my responsibility." Sarah wrote nothing. Instead, she simply looked at Ava for several seconds. Then she said softly, "I think that's exactly why he turned around." The interview ended without signatures or dramatic speeches. As Sarah prepared to leave, Noah ran into the kitchen. "Wait." He disappeared into his room. A moment later, he returned, carrying the drawing that read, "Mom comes home." "You can borrow this." Sarah smiled. "Are you sure?" He nodded seriously. "So people know what happened." Sarah carefully accepted the picture as though it were priceless. "In that case," she smiled, "I'll take very good care of it." The following Monday, the story aired during the evening news. No dramatic music accompanied it, no sensational headlines, only Sarah standing at the same bus stop where everything had begun. Behind her, commuters waited quietly for the next Route 29. She spoke directly into the camera. "Most nights this is simply another Chicago bus stop." She paused. But last Monday it became the place where one driver's decision reminded several strangers what public service can truly mean. The report showed no hidden footage, no surveillance video. Instead, it featured interviews. Marcus admitting he had judged too quickly, Emily describing compassion, Linda explaining that dispatchers often heard stories the public never imagined, Tom speaking briefly. "I don't think I did anything extraordinary." He smiled modestly. "I just didn't want one little boy wondering all night whether his mom was coming home." Finally, the camera showed Ava holding Noah's drawing. She said only one sentence. "My son remembers that his mother came home." The report ended with a close-up of the folded bus ticket resting beside Noah's picture. Nothing more. Across Chicago, thousands of viewers watched quietly. Some smiled, some cried, some immediately changed the channel. But others remembered someone who had once helped them. And still others wondered whether they might become that person for someone else. Inside the CTA break room, several drivers watched together during dinner. Nobody spoke until the segment ended. Then one veteran driver quietly said, "I've driven this city for 31 years. He looked toward Tom. "I hope if I'm ever the last safe way home for somebody." He smiled. "I make the right decision too." Tom lowered his eyes. The television continued playing the next news story. But no one in the room seemed interested anymore. The television report spread farther than anyone expected. By Tuesday morning, the station had uploaded the 3-minute segment to its website and social media pages. Thousands of people watched before breakfast. By lunchtime, hundreds of comments had appeared. Many simply wrote, "Thank you." Others shared memories of bus drivers who had waited an extra moment, teachers who had stayed after school, nurses who had held a frightened patient's hand, or strangers who had quietly stepped forward when no one else did. The story had become larger than one bus route. It reminded people of someone they had never forgotten. At the CTA headquarters, however, the growing attention created a different kind of conversation. David Miller entered the weekly operations meeting carrying several printed pages. Regional managers sat around a long conference table, reviewing maintenance schedules, staffing shortages, and service delays. Most meetings followed predictable routines. This one did not. David placed the newspaper printout beside his folder. "I'd like to discuss Route 29. Several supervisors exchanged knowing looks. One of them sighed. "The driver who turned around." "Yes." Another manager folded his arms. "We already handled the discipline." "We did." "So what's left to discuss?" David looked around the room. "The policy." Someone immediately replied, "The policy exists for a reason." "It does." "If we start making exceptions." David nodded before the man could finish. "I agree." The room grew quiet. Then David distributed copies of the public comments gathered from the news report. "I'd like everyone to read the first page." For several minutes, only paper rustled across the table. One comment came from a firefighter, another from a retired teacher, another from a mother whose disabled son depended on buses every day. One sentence appeared repeatedly in different forms. Public transportation isn't only about moving buses, it's about getting people home. When everyone finished reading, David asked quietly, "What do all these people have in common?" Nobody answered immediately. "They're not asking us to ignore policy." He tapped the papers. "They're asking whether our policy leaves room for judgment in extraordinary situations." The discussion lasted nearly 2 hours. No decisions were made. But for the first time in years, the Operations Committee agreed to begin reviewing the emergency discretion guidelines for drivers. It wasn't a dramatic reform. It was simply the beginning of a conversation. Across town, Ava knew nothing about any of it. She had just finished cleaning the accounting department on the 23rd floor when Rick Donovan approached. "Ava!" She looked up from her cart. "Morning." Rick seemed unusually uncomfortable. "You got a minute?" "Sure." He held a folded newspaper. She immediately recognized Sarah Whitmore's article. "Oh." Rick rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't realize." "Realize what?" "That overtime caused all of that." She shook her head. "It wasn't your fault." "I kept you late. You were following instructions. I still feel responsible." Ava smiled gently. "I don't." Rick hesitated before speaking again. "I've already changed the cleaning assignments." She looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "If someone is staying late unexpectedly," he shrugged, "we'll rotate the overtime instead of assigning the same people every time." Ava blinked. "You didn't have to do that." "Maybe not." He looked away awkwardly. "But maybe I should have done it sooner." Before leaving, Rick reached into his pocket and handed her a sealed envelope. "What's this?" "The payroll department corrected your overtime calculation." She opened it carefully. An additional check. $41.75. Exactly what she had expected. Rick smiled. "No mistakes this time." After he walked away, Ava looked at the small check for several seconds. It wasn't a fortune. It barely covered Noah's medication. Yet she couldn't help smiling. One small kindness had quietly encouraged another. That evening after school, Noah climbed onto the old sofa holding his homework folder. "I have an assignment." "Oh, we have to write about a hero." Ava laughed. "That's a big topic." "I already know mine." She expected him to say firefighter, or doctor, or perhaps an astronaut. Instead, he answered immediately. "The bus driver." Ava smiled. "I thought you might choose Spider-Man." "He doesn't drive buses." "That's true. And Spider-Man probably wouldn't know our route." She laughed harder. "No, probably not." Noah opened his notebook. "How do you spell Gallagher?" She slowly spelled the name. He carefully wrote each letter, then stopped. "Mom?" "Yes." "Do heroes know they're heroes?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't always think so." "Then how do they find out?" She looked toward the window where evening sunlight stretched across the apartment. "Sometimes," she thought carefully, "yes, because someone thanks them." The next afternoon, Tom reported for another Route 29 shift. He expected passengers to recognize him after the news story. Most didn't. Chicago moved quickly. People hurried to work, checked phones, carried groceries, lived their own lives. That suited him perfectly. Near 6 o'clock, an elderly woman boarded using a walker. Tom lowered the bus, waited patiently, and greeted her as he always did. "Take your time." She smiled. "I know you." Tom chuckled. "I drive this route every week." "No." She pointed toward the newspaper tucked under her arm. "From the television?" Tom looked slightly embarrassed. "Oh." She tapped her transit card. "My husband used to drive buses." "Really?" 34 years. Tom smiled. "Long career." He always said something. "What was that?" She looked directly at him. "He said every seat on a bus carries someone's whole world." Tom remained silent. She continued walking toward her seat. Before sitting down, she turned once more. "I think he would have liked you." For several moments, Tom simply watched the road ahead. Every seat carries someone's whole world. He glanced into the mirror. A teenager wearing headphones, a woman carrying grocery bags, a father holding a sleeping toddler, a college student reading textbooks. Ordinary people, each carrying worries no one else could see. The phrase stayed with him for the rest of the shift. Later that night, after Noah had gone to bed, Ava opened the notebook where she kept household expenses. Inside, beside the monthly budget, rested 2 folded pieces of paper. The old bus ticket and Noah's drawing. She looked at them for a long time. Then she added something new, a small handwritten note. "Never forget that strangers can become part of your way home." She folded the note and slipped it beside the ticket. Years from now, the paper might fade, the ink might blur, but she hoped the memory never would, because some journeys were measured not by miles, but by the people who refused to leave you standing alone in the rain. Autumn slowly gave way to early winter. The trees along Route 29 surrendered their last leaves. Morning air became sharper. People zipped their coats before stepping onto the sidewalks. Chicago moved into another season, but some memories refused to fade. Nearly 6 weeks had passed since the rainy night that changed so many ordinary lives. Tom Gallagher still drove the same route. Ava still worked nights. Noah still left the hallway light on. Only now he switched it off himself the moment he heard his mother's key in the lock. It had become their new little ritual. One Thursday afternoon, David Miller stopped Tom just before his shift. "You have a minute?" "Of course." David handed him a small envelope. Tom looked puzzled. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a single sheet of paper. CTA Policy Review Committee. Tom read the first paragraph carefully. Following review of Incident Report 29-114, the committee recommends creation of a discretionary emergency response guideline allowing operators in limited circumstances to request immediate supervisory authorization for extraordinary passenger safety situations. Tom looked up. "They changed the policy." "Not entirely." David smiled. "They started changing it." Tom read the page again. His name never appeared. Neither did Ava's. Only the event itself. Anonymous, professional, useful. Exactly the way he would have wanted. "I didn't expect this." "Neither did we." David laughed softly. "Funny how one decision can expose something everyone else overlooked." Tom carefully folded the paper. "It still doesn't erase the reprimand." "No," David smiled. "But maybe it'll make it the last reprimand someone receives for doing the right thing." Tom slipped the letter into his lunch bag beside the photograph of Margaret that he carried every day. For the first time in years, the memory of losing her felt a little less heavy. Not because the pain had disappeared, because something good had finally grown from it. That same evening, Ava finished work 20 minutes earlier than expected. Rick approached her cleaning cart. "You can head home." "Really?" "The schedule's covered." She smiled. "No argument from me." Outside, the air was bitterly cold. Instead of rushing immediately toward the bus stop, Ava walked into a small bakery near the station. She rarely bought treats. Money remained too tight. Today she made an exception, one cinnamon roll, one chocolate cookie. The cashier smiled. "Special occasion." Ava thought for a second. "Kind of." Back home, Noah grinned the moment he saw the paper bag. "Dessert?" "I know," he laughed. "We never have dessert on Thursdays." "Today's different." They shared the cinnamon roll after dinner. Noah pushed the larger half toward his mother. "You take it." "You need to grow." "So do you." She laughed. "I think I'm finished growing." "You still work really hard." She looked at him with affectionate disbelief. "Where do you learn these things?" He shrugged. "Mrs. Brooks." Eleanor, sitting nearby with her knitting, pretended not to hear. "I have no idea what he's talking about." Everyone laughed. After dinner, Noah disappeared into his room. When he returned, he carried an envelope decorated with crooked stars drawn in blue crayon. "What's that?" "For the bus driver." Ava carefully opened it. Inside rested another drawing. This time the picture showed a bus beneath a bright moon. A driver smiled through the windshield. Near the door stood a mother holding a little boy's hand. Above them, Noah had written, "Thank you for bringing my mom home." Ava blinked away unexpected tears. "It's beautiful." "Can we give it to him?" She hesitated. "I don't even know if we'll see him." "We can try." Saturday afternoon, fate quietly answered the question. Ava and Noah boarded Route 29 to visit the public library. The moment the bus doors opened, Noah gasped. "It's him." Tom looked up from the driver's seat. Recognition slowly spread across his face. "Well?" He smiled warmly. "I know those two." Noah hurried forward. "I made something." Tom accepted the envelope carefully. "For me?" "Yes." "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." Passengers waited patiently as Tom opened the card. His eyes settled on the child's drawing. He remained silent for several seconds. Finally, he cleared his throat. "This," he smiled, "might be the nicest thing anyone has ever given me." Noah beamed. My mom says heroes don't always know they're heroes. Tom glanced toward Ava. She looked slightly embarrassed. I may have said something like that. Tom shook his head gently. I think your mom gives me too much credit. No, Noah answered immediately. She doesn't. Several nearby passengers quietly smiled. One older man removed his cap respectfully. A young woman waiting behind Ava whispered, I saw you on the news. Tom laughed awkwardly. I was hoping people had forgotten. I don't think they will. The ride felt strangely familiar. Different passengers, different weather, the same route, the same quiet warmth. When Ava and Noah stepped off at the library, Tom called after them. Miss Fisher! She turned. He held up the drawing. This one's going in my locker. Noah pumped his fist happily. I knew it. Weeks later, just before Christmas, CTA employees gathered for their annual holiday breakfast. Nothing extravagant. Coffee, pastries, a few speeches. David Miller stood at the podium. Before everyone leaves, he held up a framed picture. Most employees leaned forward curiously. Inside the frame rested a child's drawing. Thank you for bringing my mom home. Tom looked genuinely startled. David smiled. With permission from the family, he pointed toward the drawing. This will hang in our operations office. Several employees applauded. Not loudly, warmly. It reminds us, David continued, that every route number eventually leads to someone's family. Tom lowered his head, overwhelmed. The applause ended. People returned to breakfast. Conversations resumed. Yet throughout the room, many employees found themselves looking once more at the simple drawing made with crayons. No awards, no medals, no expensive plaque. Only a child's gratitude. Sometimes that carried more weight than any official recognition. Late that evening, after finishing his final route before Christmas, Tom sat alone inside the parked bus for a few extra minutes. Snowflakes drifted quietly through the windshield. He reached into his lunch bag. First he removed Margaret's photograph, then Noah's drawing. He placed them side by side. For years he had believed the worst night of his life would always define him. Now another memory stood beside it. A rainy evening, a frightened mother, a little boy waiting beneath a hallway light. He smiled softly. Looks like we finally helped someone get home. The bus remained silent. Outside, snow continued falling across Chicago. Inside, for the first time in many winters, Tom no longer felt entirely alone. Nearly a year passed. Seasons circled quietly through Chicago. Spring softened the frozen sidewalks. Summer filled neighborhood parks with children. Autumn returned with familiar winds. Life remained far from easy for Ava Fisher, but it no longer felt quite so fragile. Some changes arrived dramatically. The most important ones almost never did. Every Friday evening before leaving work, Rick Donovan now reviewed the overtime schedule himself. He made certain no employee repeatedly carried the burden alone. No announcement explained the change, no policy memo celebrated it. It simply became the new way things were done. Linda Chavez continued answering hundreds of dispatch calls each week. Most involved delayed buses, missed connections, or lost property. Every now and then, another frightened passenger called after dark. Whenever possible, she listened a little longer before ending the conversation. People often needed to be heard before they needed to be helped. The framed drawing still hung in the CTA operations office. New employees frequently stopped to look at it. Some asked what it meant. Veteran drivers always answered the same way. That's there to remind us who we are really driving. The explanation never grew more complicated than that. Tom Gallagher was now only 8 months away from retirement. His hair had become a little grayer. His knees ached more after long shifts. Yet every afternoon before beginning Route 29, he quietly glanced at Noah's drawing inside his locker. It had become part of his routine. Margaret's photograph, Noah's picture, lunch bag, bus keys, then work. One rainy October afternoon, a young driver named Carlos approached him. "Mr. Gallagher." "You can call me Tom." "I've been meaning to thank you." Tom looked puzzled. "For what?" "The training instructor told us about Route 29. Tom smiled awkwardly. "It wasn't really my story." Carlos shook his head. "It became ours." Tom waited. "The instructor said something I'll never forget." "What was that?" Carlos smiled. "He said every decision behind the wheel eventually reaches someone's family." Tom laughed softly. "That's a good lesson." "I wanted you to know—" Carlos adjusted his uniform cap. "It made me think differently about this job." After the younger driver walked away, Tom stood quietly beside his bus. He had spent decades believing he was simply following routes across a city. Now he understood that he had also been traveling through people's lives, sometimes for only 10 minutes, sometimes at exactly the right moment. Across town, Noah was no longer the shy 8-year-old who waited anxiously beneath the hallway light. Now 9, almost 10, he had grown taller. His asthma had improved. His grades had risen. His teacher often praised his kindness toward classmates. One afternoon, his elementary school announced an essay contest. The topic was simple: write about one ordinary person who changed your life. Most students chose parents, teachers, grandparents. Noah chose a bus driver. His essay filled only 2 handwritten pages. He described the rainy night, the hallway light, the promise his mother kept. Then he ended with one sentence: "Heroes are people who help someone get home even when nobody is watching." His teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, wiped away a tear before placing the essay inside the principal's mailbox. Weeks later, Noah won first place. The prize wasn't money. It was the chance to read his essay during the school's community appreciation evening. Ava almost cried before he even reached the stage. Tom had no idea any of this was happening. Until one afternoon, Ava boarded his bus carrying an invitation. She waited until the other passengers had found seats. Then she approached the front. "I have something for you." Tom accepted the envelope. "What is it?" "You'll see." Inside rested an invitation printed by the elementary school. Community Appreciation Night. Special guest invitation. He looked confused. "I don't understand." "Noah wrote about you." Tom blinked. What?" "He wants you there." "I don't think I belong at a school ceremony." "You belong exactly where he wants you." For a long moment, Tom said nothing. Finally, he smiled. "I'll be there." The school auditorium filled quickly on Thursday evening. Parents sat beside grandparents. Teachers welcomed families. Children whispered excitedly backstage. Tom arrived wearing his only suit. The same navy suit he had worn to Margaret's funeral years earlier. It still fit. Mostly. He quietly slipped into a seat near the back. He hadn't told anyone at work where he was going. On stage, Noah walked nervously toward the microphone holding several folded pages. He spotted his mother in the front row. Then he searched farther back. When he saw Tom, his entire face brightened. He smiled before beginning. "My name is Noah Fisher." His small voice echoed through the room. "I want to tell you about someone who drives a bus." He didn't use dramatic language. He simply told the truth. He described waiting beneath the hallway light, wondering if his mother would come home. Then hearing her say, "I'm coming home." Many parents quietly wiped away tears. Tom listened with his hands folded tightly together. Near the end, Noah looked directly toward him. "I used to think buses only took people to work." He smiled. "Now I know sometimes they bring families back together." Silence filled the auditorium. Then applause slowly grew louder. Not for the essay, for the honesty inside it. After the ceremony ended, dozens of parents thanked Tom. He accepted every handshake with quiet embarrassment. One father finally asked, "So what did you actually do?" Tom smiled. "I turned the bus around." The man laughed. "That's all?" Tom nodded. "Sometimes—" He looked toward Ava and Noah laughing together across the room. "That's enough." Later that evening, while walking toward the parking lot, Ava caught up beside him. "You didn't have to come." "I wouldn't have missed it." She smiled. "You know?" "What?" "Noah doesn't leave the hallway light on anymore." Tom looked surprised. "He doesn't?" She shook her head. "He says he already knows I'm coming home." Tom looked up at the dark autumn sky. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, those words meant more to him than every newspaper article, television interview, or framed drawing combined. Some victories never appeared in headlines. They lived quietly inside a child's heart. And sometimes, that was the greatest destination any journey could ever reach. 5 years later, the hallway light still existed. The apartment did not. Life had carried Ava Fisher and Noah into a different neighborhood, a slightly larger home, and a future that once seemed impossible to imagine. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't wealth. It was stability. To Ava, that felt like abundance. She now supervised the evening custodial team for the same office building where she had once worked alone through endless nights. When Rick Donovan retired, he had recommended her without hesitation. "She takes care of people," he had told management. "You can teach procedures. You can't teach character." She still carried a folded bus ticket inside her wallet. The paper had become soft with age. The ink had almost disappeared. Most people would have thrown it away years ago. She never would. Every now and then, Noah, now a confident teenager, would tease her. "You know, buses use digital passes now, right?" She always smiled. "I know." "So why keep that old ticket?" "Because it reminds me that getting home is never something to take for granted." He never argued with that answer. Some lessons grew more meaningful as children became adults. Tom Gallagher had officially retired 3 years earlier. His final day on Route 29 had been surprisingly quiet. No speeches, no television cameras, no large celebration, just coworkers shaking his hand as he climbed down from the driver's seat for the last time. Before leaving the depot, he had emptied his locker. Inside were only 4 things: his lunch bag, Margaret's photograph, Noah's drawing, and the framed letter describing the revised emergency discretion policy that had grown from one rainy night. He carried all 4 home. They remained together on a bookshelf in his living room. One Saturday afternoon in early spring, Tom received an unexpected phone call. "Mr. Gallagher." "This is Tom." "Hi." The young voice sounded familiar. "You probably don't remember me." Tom smiled. "Try me. It's Noah." Tom laughed immediately. "I remember you. I'm graduating from high school next month." "Already?" "I know." They both laughed. "It happened fast." "It always does." There was a brief silence. "I was wondering—" Noah hesitated. "Would you come?" Tom sat quietly for a moment. "I'd be honored." Graduation day arrived beneath clear blue skies. Families filled the football field with folding chairs and cameras. Ava searched the crowd until she finally spotted Tom walking slowly toward the visitor section, wearing the same navy suit. She hurried over. "You came." "I said I would." She hugged him without hesitation. Some friendships no longer required permission. During the ceremony, Noah graduated with honors. He had earned a scholarship to study public administration. When one teacher announced his future plans, several audience members applauded politely. Only Ava and Tom understood why Noah had chosen that path. After the ceremony, they gathered beneath a large oak tree near the parking lot. Tom handed Noah a small wrapped package. "You didn't have to bring me anything." "I wanted to." Inside rested a simple fountain pen. Noah looked puzzled. Tom smiled. My first supervisor gave me that when I started driving buses. You've kept it all these years. I have. Why give it to me? Tom answered gently. Because someday you'll sign papers that affect other people's lives. He paused. I hope you'll always remember there are people behind every policy. Noah looked at the pen for a long moment. I will. I know you will. Ava quietly wiped away tears. Years earlier, Tom had helped her come home. Now he was helping her son begin his own journey. Some gifts traveled much farther than anyone expected. A few months later, Noah visited the CTA operations building for a college research project about public transportation. The receptionist welcomed him inside. As he waited for an interview, something caught his eye. The framed drawing, his drawing, still hanging on the wall. The paper had faded slightly. The blue crayon looked lighter than before. Yet every word remained readable. Thank you for bringing my mom home. A younger dispatcher noticed him staring. You've seen it before? Noah smiled. I drew it. The woman blinked. You did? He nodded. It was a long time ago. She smiled warmly. We still show it to every new employee. Really? It reminds people why the work matters. Noah looked at the picture with quiet disbelief. He had been only 8 years old. He never imagined a handful of crayons would outlive childhood. Before leaving, he stood before the drawing one last time. He thought about the frightened little boy who had once waited beneath a hallway light. That child had believed he was simply waiting for his mother. Only years later did he understand something much larger. He had also been waiting for proof that kindness still existed. And someone had given it to him. That evening, Noah visited Tom. The old bus driver now spent most afternoons tending flowers in his small backyard. I saw the drawing. Tom smiled. It's still there. It is. They sat together on the porch as the sun slowly disappeared behind neighboring houses. After a while, Noah asked, Do you ever regret turning the bus around? Tom looked almost surprised. No. Not even with the reprimand. Tom chuckled softly. I've forgotten the reprimand. What do you remember? Tom leaned back in his chair. A little boy stopped waiting. Silence settled comfortably between them. Finally, Noah spoke again. You know. What? I don't think this story was ever about a bus. Tom smiled. No. I think it was about somebody deciding another person's family mattered. Tom nodded slowly. I think you're right. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, porch lights flickered on one by one. Somewhere nearby, another parent arrived home after a long day. A child ran through a doorway. A family became whole again for one more evening. The world rarely changed because of grand speeches. More often it changed because ordinary people quietly refused to ignore someone standing alone. A driver listened, a dispatcher cared, a nurse noticed, a passenger reconsidered, a supervisor reflected, a reporter told the truth, a neighbor stayed, a mother kept her promise, a little boy never forgot. And on one rainy night in Chicago, a bus that could have driven away instead turned around. The distance it traveled was only a few city blocks. The difference it made lasted a lifetime. Every one of us will eventually face a moment when we become either the person who walks away or the person who turns back. This story reminds us that true kindness is rarely loud, dramatic, or celebrated in the moment. Often it is a quiet decision made by an ordinary person who chooses compassion over convenience. A bus driver who refused to ignore a mother's final call. A dispatcher who listened instead of rushing. A child who never forgot a single act of mercy. None of them were wealthy or powerful enough to change the whole world, but together they completely changed one family's world. And that is how hope travels from one heart to another. We may never know how deeply our smallest actions affect someone else's life. A few extra minutes, a kind word, a helping hand, or simply choosing to care may become the memory that carries another person through their darkest night. The world doesn't become better because extraordinary people appear. It becomes better because ordinary people keep choosing kindness when no one is watching. So wherever life takes you, remember this. If you ever have the chance to help someone find their way home, whether literally or emotionally, never underestimate the difference that one decision can make. Years may pass, but a single act of compassion can echo through generations. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment when a stranger's kindness changed your life? Or have you been that person for someone else? Share your story in the comments below. We read every one of them. And if you enjoy inspiring stories about hope, compassion, and the extraordinary power of ordinary people, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next heartfelt story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.